Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Live from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the next episode of the To Be Frank Show. I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli. I'm happy to be with you today. I'm really excited about the growth of our show. The numbers are continuing to rise in terms of the viewership, and we're really excited about it. We think that this concept has a lot of legs to it. We think that it really has a lot of interest to people because we are stripping out the politics and the ideologies and trying to get down to where the issues are. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to talk about political things, but we're not going to choose up and take sides. Enough of the people in the media have already done that. They're the great dividers, and we're not going to do that. What we're going to try to do is get you information, and you're going to get some opinion from me, but it's going to be based on information and not political ideology. That's the key to the show. You can catch us and watch us on the To Be Frank Show YouTube, the To Be Frank Show Twitter, the To Be Frank Show LinkedIn, the To Be Frank Show Facebook, and then the ToBeFrankShow.com. So we're happy to be here today. Let's get on with the show. Now we have a very interesting guest, and this guest is important in terms of the issues that we're dealing with now in the country as it relates to schools. His name is Dan Lopez, and he's the CEO of No Excuse University. And we'll explain to you when I introduce him what that's all about. But we're going to ask him a lot of questions about the reopening of schools. He's had a long history in elementary, middle, and high school dealings. He's been on school boards, and he's got some really interesting perspective as it relates to our children and what's going on. So we're looking forward to the interview. But first comes the monologue. Okay, we're going to start out in Seattle. The Seattle police chief a few days ago sent in her resignation. And she is an African-American female who, by all indications, tried to do as good a job as she could do. But under the circumstances that they're dealing with up in Seattle, things are incredibly, incredibly tough. Now, Seattle's not the only place. You've got Portland, you've got Chicago, and you've got New York City. So, you know, Seattle is one of a handful of cities that has had tremendous problems. And what they're doing is exactly what Billy D. de Blasio is doing in New York. They are running businesses out of their city. They are really encouraging lawlessness in their city. They cut their budget by $4 million, which is not a ton of money in their budget, but they're removing 100 police officers. This is not a time you remove police officers. It solves nothing. You know, the Summer of Love mayor, you know, herself, Jenny Durkin, okay? She's a beauty. And she has now almost reversed course. Maybe she watches the show, who the hell knows? But the fact of the matter is, now she's concerned about all this looting and all this rioting and all the things that are going on. Well, she should have worried about that a couple of months ago. But, you know, this is just the way it goes. It's all politics. They're playing politics with everything in our lives, and it's got to stop. So Seattle, basically, as I mentioned, their chief of police, Carmen Best, resigned. I mentioned that she's an African-American female, okay? She, on all accords, appeared to do the best job she could do working with an insane city council and a crazy mayor. I mean, this is what happens here. And when the police now get sand kicked in their face, like what is happening in certain cities around the country, you've got complete anarchy. You've got no rule of law. You've got all kinds of issues. Roll the tape.
The neck was a disgrace, okay?
Yeah.
It was a disgrace.
I'm talking about, what does systemic racism mean to you?
I hope the answer to that question is no. Does anybody really answer that question accurately?
But what
Does
about not
anybody
hope?
really know?
What about analysis? What's your cold-hearted
I
view
have
of it?
seen where there is a difference, and I don't want there to be a difference. I don't like that there would be a difference. But with that being said,
Why do you think black men are
police
two
have
and a half
killed
times?
white people
I know, but why do you think black
in a
men
larger number,
in quantity?
police have killed white
But
people.
why do you think black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men?
That I don't know, but
Why? Why do you
I
think
don't like it.
Is that enough?
Of course it's not enough. And I think, again, it goes right to the heart of what we're talking about here, which is where Donald Trump sits. Donald Trump is the chief executive, the commander in chief, right? The leader of the free world. He doesn't have to not like something, Chris. He's not a pundit on air, right? This is someone who can use the power of the executive. President Obama used to say, with the power of the pen, right? He can use the power of the pen and change it. He can engage in executive action, executive order, sign legislation. He could urge the Senate right now to pass justice and policing. Instead, he pulled out this watered down version of an executive order after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, which, by the way, he has yet to speak to. He's not done anything meaningful in this area. Yes, I give him credit for the First Step Act, but it's time to see some changes after the first step.
You know, that clip is really indicative of, on one side of the equation, no matter what happens, Trump's going to get blamed. Okay? He's just going to get blamed, and there's really not any rhyme or reason. No matter what he does, you know, African Americans and the Democrats are going to blame him. Now, on the other side, he's done nothing to endear himself in these areas. And what happens is now the whole policing scenario was put completely on, Donald Trump. And, you know, if you don't have funded police, you're not going to have law and order in your city. You get back to Seattle, you get back to what happens with the Seattle police chief. And she basically, resigns because she can't take it anymore. Again, an African-American female police chief. And you have to wonder, the more and more and more that the police are pounded in this country, nothing's changing. This isn't like, this woman from the Black Lives Matter movement. We're getting nowhere, at least what I can see. NBA players that are kneeling down, they have that constitutional right to do it. I just don't see that that's creating any change. The only way you're going to get change in the country is that a lot of these mayors in these cities have got to understand that they're going to wreck their cities by the lawlessness and the looting and allowing for the rioting, because businesses are not going to stay involved in their cities. They're going to move. New York City, there is a mass exodus out of there like no one's ever seen before. The governor sits back and watches it, kicks sand in the face, $1 billion. These people now obviously New York City has a bigger budget than Seattle. Billy D. de Blasio, Baghdad Bill, basically took $1 billion out of the budget. Okay? These people in Seattle took $4 million out, and about 100 officers. I don't see how that solves anything. Yes, policing needs to get better, and they need to be more sensitized to the African American community, and all of those things that we've said over and over and over. But you're not going to solve anything by the way that you're actually going about this. It doesn't solve anything. The whole Black Lives Matter movement, if they continue to concentrate on rioting to get their point across, I mean, you've got some terrible things that are out there now. The Black Lives Matter movement literally endorsed some of the lawlessness and the looting on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, which we're going to get to here in a minute. But, everyone I think saw the story that they called it, well, it's okay. We'll loot and we'll take money out of high-end stores, or we'll take merchandise out of high-end stores, and that'll be considered reparations. Now, if you want to kill a movement, just continue to take that position, because nobody is going to back that. I want to back Black Lives Matter, but what I want to see is a coalition that gets put together. Charles Barkley, the great NBA star, the star of TNT's show on TNT about the NBA, he said it best. All this stuff is great, all this kneeling and all this stuff in the jerseys, but somebody's actually got to do something about this. I want to be involved. I want this show to actually do something about this. But we're not going to do anything about it when they go to Michigan Avenue and they riot, and then all of a sudden spokespeople from the Black Lives Matter movement say, well, this is just another form of reparations. You're going to lose the whole country on this one. As far as Seattle, as far as Portland, as far as Chicago, and as far as New York City, you're blowing it. And let me tell you what's going to happen. Joe Biden and now his running mate, which we're going to get to in a big way, Kamala Harris, are going to have to make a decision. Do they, in fact, back this type of scenario, or do they not? Because I'm telling you, it's going to be hung around their neck if they do. It's going to be their coronavirus, which took Trump down, okay? And we got to figure out, how we make changes that doesn't wreck our major cities in the country. So when you see the police chief stepping down, I wish her well. I feel bad for her. I think she tried her best. But certain circumstances do not allow for people to hang around. Okay. The second segment is really an interesting one, and it really ties directly to some of my background. It's about the stock market and this gigantic rise again that we're seeing in the stock market, but yet the economy is not good. And you have to really ask yourself a bunch of questions about why that is. Well, first off, I think in the world there's not really an alternative use to people's money. What does that mean? Well, you used to be able to buy bonds, you used to be able to buy T-bills, you used to be able to buy these things, and you would get a return. You'd get a 3, 4, 5, 6% return. I remember back, in my day when I was a lot younger and I made a little bit of money, I was buying municipal bonds tax-free for about 7, 8%. Those days are long gone, okay? There's really no alternative use to your capital, because there's no interest anymore. We're in really a no interest environment. So people are looking to, all right, how do I make some return on my money? Well, I believe not only in the United States, but on the world standard, the U.S. stock market still is considered to be a safe harbor for money. Roll the tape.
Where are we here? How are we doing? And the virus isn't under control yet, so do we really know?
We're slowly getting the virus under control, and other countries have, and so we will win that war. But no one really knows. We're kind of still in the middle of this thing. We're having this recession. We don't really see it you see it in unemployment, but not incomes, home prices, delinquencies, like the basic suffering that comes out of it sometimes. And so you're going to see some of that effect down the road. Most of the economists have this model where the 10.2% unemployment just reported, would be 9, maybe under 9 by the end of the year, maybe under 7 by the end of next year. I hope that that's the case. To have that happen, we need really good government intervention, and which they're working on. And I think they did a very good job the first time. So I think the government did get it right. And you can criticize some of these programs, but I think the administration, Secretary Mnuchin, the Democrats, the Republicans, they did it within weeks. Have you ever seen our government do something within weeks? But both the PPP, the unemployment insurance, the payroll checks, the Fed programs, and those things did stop it from getting far worse. And so, and we just need a little bit of continuation.
Do we need more?
Yeah, we're going to need more, yeah.
Now, that's the CEO of JP Morgan, which is one of the biggest financial institutions in the country. His name's Jamie Dimon. and I happen to agree with a lot of what he says. His whole point is this rise in the stock market is doing nothing for the average person, the average small business, the average wage earner that is out of work, that is being ravished by not only the coronavirus. Now, here's another big issue that really has to be discussed. And you really got to think about this now, because certain places like New York State just refuse to open, okay? And now they're complaining about people are out of work and we got to give them more money, we got to do this and we got to do that, okay? They started all this. Remember, China to Europe, Europe to New York, New York to the rest of the country. That's how this coronavirus traveled. And now the governor has a 31-state ban. People can't go into New York. He has shut himself completely off. Now, is he doing this for political reasons? It just seems to me that every Democratic governor and every Democratic mayor has gotten the talking points from the Democratic Party that you just stay shut down and let's screw up the economy. I mean, I can't think about any other rational argument. I mean, like I mentioned before, New York has been shut down for so long. What are these people going to do? The businesses are fleeing out of there as fast as they can. But let's not worry about the big businesses. What about the small businesses, the family-owned businesses? Those are the ones I'm concerned about. Those are the ones that Jamie Dimon is talking about. So if some politician, no matter what side of the equation comes on, oh, the economy's doing great because the stock market's up, that's garbage. Because you got to look at the unemployment rate. You got to take a look at the harm that is being caused not only by the coronavirus, but now by the politics of the coronavirus. It can't break on party lines naturally the way that this thing has broken. It's impossible. Every Democratic mayor's going one way, every Democratic governor's going one way, and every Republican governor's going the other way. It's impossible. It doesn't work that way. Economies don't work that way. Cities don't work that way. This is all political. And the problem is these politics are playing with people's lives. And we're going to get to what they're doing with the children in the schools here in our interview today. But it's just impossible that it breaks down the way it breaks down. So what am I advocating on this show? That we've got to have an ability to be able to safely open up our country, put people back to work. Now, again, every show, certain states, including the one I live in, absolutely blew the rollout 2 months ago. We've got to be better at this. But there's got to be a happy medium here. Like everything else in life, there's got to be a happy medium. And we get back to the interview with Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan. Here's the issue. He's just saying a lot of people are being left behind here. Don't just wake up and look at the stock market and say, oh, things are getting a lot better. They're not getting better. They're not going to get better until we get people back to work safely. We get children back to school safely. Okay? Now, a lot of people may not want to hear this, but this is how I get my information. I've talked to 2 or 3 pharmaceutical companies. I don't want to mention their names, but I've talked to ones that are involved not only in the vaccine, but involved in the PPE, and they're involved in every aspect of this coronavirus. They, in their business models, are projecting that this coronavirus is going to last in the United States of America, forget about the rest of the world for a minute, for another 12 to 18 months. Now, we just got to come to grips with this. We just have to come to grips with this. Another 12 to 18 months. If we go on down the road and continue to borrow money and keep people out of work, we're going to be a third world economy. I mean, this is just going to tear apart. Okay? Forget all this Wall Street garbage. That's a bunch of crap. What I'm talking about is you can't spend money the way we're spending money. You're never going to be able to pay it back. but you also can't keep a capitalist economy shut down the way that certain states and certain cities have shut it down. You can't do it. You've got to find the middle of the road. We talk about the middle of the road every show. The problem is nobody can get there. But Jamie Dimon's position is one that I urge everyone to think about. Forget about what you see on the news, because that's a bunch of hyperbole gaslighting. When you see the stock market going up, you see your 401k going up, that's great. And I'm happy for everybody. But don't think that that alone is solving any kind of problem to the small independent business person or to the guy that's been, or the gal that's been out of work for a long time and is trying to figure out, how do I pay my bills? And we're going to get into a segment about what the government now is trying to do, and they can't agree on anything. And we're going to get into what we think, based on the facts, makes some sense here. It's got to be a combo platter. Okay. So the third segment is all about now the new vice presidential nominee on the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris. Am I a big Kamala Harris fan? I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I wouldn't say that I don't like her either, okay? She is incredibly liberal. I think if you're asking me, I think the Biden campaign made a mistake because she is going to pull this thing way to the left. I mean, this is just what she is. She was voted in, people that pay attention to this kind of thing, okay? And she was voted by the Americans for Democratic Action, a liberal advocacy group that compiles these types of ratings. She was rated the most liberal senator in the Senate in 2019, okay? So, I mean, there really doesn't need to be any more discussion about where she sits on the political spectrum. Joe Biden, who certainly is not as left as Bernie Sanders, now went out and instead of trying to find a centrist, okay, he went to the far left and got Kamala Harris. Now, we're going to have to see how that plays, but here's my advice to both candidates. And this is, again, just common sense. If you don't have 40% base by now, we know Trump has about a 40% base, and I'm predicting that Biden has about a 40% base, okay? If you don't have a 40% base 80 days before the election, you might as well, pack up and go to Tahiti, because you're not going to win the election. So let's assume that both candidates have a base that's in place. Here's my advice, and this is the most commonsensical thing I could ever come up with. Forget about your base for the next 80 days. Forget about it. They're in place. You're going to have to grab the 20% who are in the middle, who are independent voters. And you're going to have to grab them state by state because, again, remember, the popular vote is only the popular vote. The Electoral College elects the president. So that's state by state. But if I'm advising both, candidates here, we know Trump's watching. Joe should be watching from the basement. We sent him word that he should be watching. He's laying on the Chase Lounge, and he's probably got a case of scotch, and he's got all the TVs and everything. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to just take a commonsensical view of this. Forget your base and deal with the 20% because they're going to decide the election. Now, we've also made a prediction on this show. Trump shot himself in the foot with the coronavirus he's trying to dig out, okay? Biden and now Kamala Harris better be careful that they don't go so far left. And I've also said, in any way, shape, or form, if they're silent or they're pro all of these Democratic cities that are having all these problems, they're going to lose millions of votes. People are not happy with those situations. So if I'm advising the Democrats, you better stay away from lawlessness, because that could be the anchor around your neck. And also, if you're talking about raising taxes and doing this and doing that, 80 days before an election, probably not a good idea. The problem is, I don't know how you ever get around raising taxes the way that these people are spending money. But you're going to become a socialist environment the way that you're going. Now, the Treasury they just print money, okay? But sooner or later, you're going to have inflation. And when you have inflation, you know the people that get hurt in inflation? The people on fixed incomes, and the little guy gets hurt. Guys like, Trammell Crow and the big developers, they own all kinds of assets. Donald Trump, they don't get hurt when there's inflation. Actually, they make money because their assets go up in value, okay? But there's no way when you just got the printing press in Washington, the money tree, if you will, okay? There's a money tree up there. Somebody tell me where it is. I want to go see it. That's the issue that you deal with, okay? But I'm advising both candidates. And again, it's common sense. Leave your bases alone now. Don't play to your base anymore. You're going to have to get the people right here. I'm one of them, okay? I'm one of those 20%ers that is going to vote the way that I think I need to vote, but I haven't seen enough. I haven't heard enough, okay? Joe's got to come out of the basement. Now, Kamala Harris does not appear to me to be somebody that they're going to lock in a basement. She just does not. She loves the limelight. She loves the cameras, So I don't think that she's of the type that is going to be constricted and put in a basement. I think she's going to be out there, but she better be ready to answer some pretty heavy questions, because it's all going to get started now. So let me go through two different schools of thought about why Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris. I think it's a bad pick for the reasons that I just threw out. I think she's too left, and I think she's really not going to appeal to the center, the 20% that's going to decide this election. But on the Democratic side, the talking points are she has electability, number one. She has ability, number two. She has authenticity, number three. And she has crossover appeal. Now, if she has crossover appeal, all right, I want to know who the crossover appeal is to. I mean, she's left of the baseball field. I mean, this is what she is. I'm not knocking it. I'm not endorsing it. She's left of the world, okay? So her crossover appeal, I'm really missing where the hell that comes in. But she's an attractive African-American, Asian senator who speaks well. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they use her in that capacity. But the crossover appeal stuff, I don't get. Here are some problems, though. Okay, so now you got the reasons that the Democrats are excited, that Joe Biden picked her. Here's some of the problems. In 2019, as I mentioned, she was voted the most liberal senator in the Senate. That's just a fact. And that was by multiple organizations that, track this kind of stuff. And they track it all by, what are your votes? How do your votes stack up? Okay? 2, she's going to have to answer for some of these attacks on Joe Biden, because you can't have it both ways. You live and die by the sword. She went after Biden in the Democratic debates when she was still a candidate to run for president. I mean, she went after him on school busing, made this compassionate plea. That kid on the bus was me, Joe, and what the hell are you doing? Okay? And she also, and this is really important, she agreed that the allegations against him for the sexual harassment scenario that he went through about 4 or 5 months ago were warranted. Okay? She said it. And there was nowhere else she could go with it because of her involvement in the third piece, which is the Brett Kavanaugh scenario. She made a complete, I thought, fool of herself the way that she handled this Brett Kavanaugh hearing. There's one thing to not agree with a guy and his ideology and you're worried he's going to go to the Supreme Court. There's all kinds of stuff. You know, that's your job as a senator. You're on the committee. You get to ask questions. But she went far beyond that. She started challenging things that are not challengeable, never provable, and she ran Brett Kavanaugh into the ground. Now, if she thinks that plays well, again, with her liberal base, let's assume that's right. But that's not where the election's going to be. It's going to be right here. And I don't think it plays well right here. Actually, it offended me. I really thought there's a way to be able to question Brett Kavanaugh and vote against him. But she used it in the biggest hyperbole known. You could go look it up. It was a terrible exhibition by her. And number 4, you know, where does she stand in this lawlessness that is engulfing the country right now? Where does she stand? She's a former prosecutor, okay? Apparently, she took a hard line against African Americans, Latinos, and all that. And they brought that up when she was running for president like it was a problem, okay? But she took a hard line as a prosecutor. Now, I know exactly where she was. She was in San Francisco. I had a big project in San Francisco. A guy that was very close to her was a consultant on our project, Willie Brown. Willie Brown apparently dated her. But the fact of the matter is that she took a very hard line. Now, what's going to be her line now that Joe Biden, and she's on the Joe Biden ticket as the vice presidential nominee? That's going to be something that we really need to look out for. Roll the tape.
Former Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee for President Joe Biden announced his running mate would be the senator from California, Kamala Harris. Now, she becomes the first African-American woman to be on a major party ticket. That history aside, this was a very smart pick for other reasons, and it's very good news for Biden and its supporters. Let's break it down. First and foremost, electability. If you want Joe Biden elected, and especially if you want Donald Trump defeated at all costs, Kamala Harris was the only viable running mate to help take Biden across the finish line. Now, some folks on political Twitter will insist none of this matters and you must vote for anyone he picks. But here in the real world, voters do care about the person who could become president. They want to make sure that that person can actually help Joe Biden get elected. And they want to make sure if elected, they'll do a decent job. Because if not, what the hell did we all learn from 2016, am I right? Okay, now nearly every other candidate had major baggage or some alienating qualities. Harris, who ran for president herself, has already been vetted, basically. She survived the primary relatively unscathed and emerged the top candidate to hop on Biden's ticket. In fact, a panel of Democratic voters in June found that a plurality wanted Harris selected as Biden's VP. She got more than any other candidate did. So next up, there's her ability. Kamala Harris wants to be president. We know that. Now, occasionally, vice presidential ambitions can get in the way of a seamless working partnership, but in this case, that's a very, very good thing because she very well might be president. Biden's aging, it's reasonable to consider that he could be succeeded at some point by his vice president.
Okay. So now you got one of these CNN operatives, you know, that just wants to give you all the good stuff, playing to the base. Big mistake, okay? You got to play to the center now. That's where the election is going to be won and lost. But you got this political operative. She's highly paid, and she just spews it, okay? Ability, she says. And then when she talked about ability, well, she wants to be president. Well, she might be president before the inauguration if they get elected. Joe may not be able to come out of the basement. He is going to have to prove to the American public that he has the stamina in order to do the hardest job in the world. if they're now going to prop up Kamala Harris and say, well, she's really going to be the president, they're going to lose. I'm just tell you right now, Kamala Harris does not beat Donald Trump. All right? And again, that's not a political statement. I am an independent. I haven't even decided who I'm voting for. Nor am I trying to get you gaslighted like the rest of these people to figure out how I can like herd people down the road like, these commentators, these highly paid political advocates that make like they're news people, okay? But the fact of the matter is Kamala Harris doesn't beat Donald Trump. Joe Biden's going to have to step up to the table. But this is now the big talking point. Oh, boy, if Joe can't do it, she certainly can, She's going to be the one. People are not going to vote for something like that. Okay? This is the number one job in the world, the most important job in the world. All right? It's the most strenuous job in the world. All right? We've got to be able to see that Joe Biden, no matter who he picked, I don't care who he picked in this regard, he needs to be able to show the American public that he's got the legs to be able to handle this thing. And thus far, we've not seen it. This whole thing, again, I said is going to blow up if they keep him in the basement until the debates. Now, Kamala Harris, she's going to be out there. It's going to be interesting what she says. Does she contradict what he says? This is what we're all going to be watching for. But in my opinion, in closing on this segment, both sides better forget their base and deal in the center. And I think that Kamala Harris, as the running mate to Joe Biden, is going to have an incredibly hard time to do that. But we'll see. We're going to watch the numbers and we'll see what happens. Okay, segment 4. Here we go. We got Pelosi and the stimulus package. All right? As I mentioned over and over and over in the beginning of this show, and I mention it every show, we concern ourselves at the 2B Frank Show with all the innocent people that didn't cause this problem, that have lost their business, are out of work, need help, all the stuff. But this is now indicative of my earlier talking points. You can't continue to print and spend money and not open up the country and allow for people just to sit back and get a check. Our system of government does not work that way. It doesn't work that way. France, Italy, certain places in Europe, it works a little bit better because people are paying 50, 60, 70% taxes and they're in a socialist government. And this is the way that it works. The government is there for you as long as you give them most of your money. That's not what we're doing here in America. So the convergence of these two problems, the coronavirus and then how do you open up the economy, can't be handled on a singular basis. They have to be handled together. Now, here's the problem that I have with Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats on Capitol Hill, and all the Republicans that are sitting back. Here's my biggest problem. Get in a damn room, sit down, and figure out both of these problems where you take away the political politics of this because you're trying to win an election in 80 days. That's the problem that I have. The government of the United States is broken, okay? Doesn't work properly. Doesn't matter who's president. Doesn't matter who's speaker. It's not working properly because nobody wants to work together. Why the hell can't they go into a room, order a bunch of pizzas, get a case of beer, and not come out until they come out with an overall plan about how you do both? I mean, isn't it common sense? Am I missing this? Isn't it common sense that you can't attack these problems individually? They've got to be handled collectively. But here's what's happening. All the Democrats now, all they want to do is just start printing more money, spend more money, another $3 trillion. Okay? This is outrageous. There's no way that can be justified. On the other hand, the Republicans have agreed to $1 trillion, which is a little bit more commonsensical, but that still doesn't work until you come to grips on both sides about how you're going to open the country. Because unless you could safely open the country, you're just going to be printing money for the rest of the time. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it doesn't work. Roll the tape.
Response.
Well, first, good morning, Dana. It's nice to be with you on a Sunday morning. Let us all be prayerful that we can meet the needs of the American people, especially as we all watch the angst that is associated with sending children back to school. What the president's advisor said it really shows the weakness and the meagerness of what the president proposed. First of all, he's saying states have the money. No, they don't. They have expenses from the coronavirus. They have lost revenue. Because of that, they are firing healthcare workers, first responders, teachers, and the rest, sanitation, transportation workers, because they don't have the money. Second of all, everything is left out. Our assistance to the schools, feeding the hungry, helping people who are going to be evicted. The president's didn't even do a moratorium. He just did a study or a look at a moratorium. So again, something's wrong. Either the president doesn't know what he's talking about, clearly his aides don't know what he is talking about, or something's very wrong here about meeting the needs of the American people.
Well, let's talk
at
about
this time.
what he did do, or what he said he did with these executive actions. Are they legal? And if you don't think they are you going to sue to block them?
Well, the fact is that whether they're legal or not takes time to figure out. I associate myself remarks with Senator Sass, who says they're unconstitutional slop.
But will you sue?
I think that's well. Right now, we want to address the needs of the American people.
Okay, so there you have the most politically spun argument you're ever going to hear. The states don't have any money. You know why they don't have any money? The state I live in has a lot of money. Florida has a lot of money, okay? The reason that the states that she's talking about don't have money is because they tax the living hell out of their people to start with these state income taxes that are just going crazy. California's broke and New York's on its way, okay? Bill de Blasio, Billy D, he's wrecked the city, and I just, I'm going to cover it every show, but I mean, he's wrecked the city. Mario Cuomo's son, Andrew Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, the greatest governor in the history of New York, his son should be ashamed of himself for what he's doing. He is putting people through hardships that are far beyond the coronavirus. You've got to open up sensibly. Don't do what they did down here in the South. I couldn't agree more. But you can't keep it shut down. And now the Speaker of the House is talking about, well, the states don't have any money. Well, whose fault is that? Is that supposed to be the American taxpayers' fault? I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm telling you, they're trying to create a socialist environment here that we just can't. We might as well move to Italy. It's prettier. The food's better, okay? If we keep going down this road. But the answer to everything is just give more money away. How about getting in a room and figuring out, remember this if you forget everything on this show, you cannot solve the coronavirus problem and how you open up individually, independently. They have to be collectively handled. And I would think that our lawmakers in Washington would at least have a sense about how you might even sit down and try to do it. Instead of going on television and talking about something, well, let's just, they don't have any money and we got to give them more money. That's not our fault. I mean, this thing, no matter if you're Democrat, no matter if you're Republican, no matter if you're an independent like me, that doesn't make sense. Get in the damn room. Call the pizza delivery company and don't leave the room until you get it figured out. Okay. Want to talk about the schools. And our guest, who will be on right after this segment, is going to talk a lot about what we need to do and how we need to do it. I'm really betwixt and between, whatever the hell that means. I've heard it before, so makes sense. I'm betwixt and between on this issue. I don't know what the right answer is. And I think that as I study it, what it tells me is the right answer is different for every city, every community. There is no right or wrong answer here. But again, you know, on party lines, all the way down the pike, cable news networks, everybody chose sides, basketball game, they got the jerseys, you know, that's where they are. How could this break on political lines all the way down the field? It's impossible, like everything else. The schools and our children, you're going to hear this out of our guest, are being completely politicized. And what a shame. Now, I'm in a position personally where I don't have school-age children or school-age grandchildren yet, okay? So I don't know what the right answer is. But for somebody to get on TV and this is the right answer, this is where, again, Trump, I think, has shown a bit of insensitivity. Let's review. We're going to open the schools, and any school district that doesn't open, we're going to take their money. That was his first ridiculous position. Now, just let's get the schools open because there's more damage to not opening the schools than opening the schools. There's some truth to that. But let me tell you, you don't need third graders running around where half the classes got the coronavirus and now they're spreading it to everybody. That's going to become a disaster, okay? That's going to become a disaster. Now, my problem is, and I had a guest on several shows ago that talked about there's no coordination between the schools, the policies, the distance learning, and all the other pieces to this thing. There's been no coordination. Now, that was probably about 2-3 weeks ago. Now, I'm hoping we're going to talk to our guest today, and hopefully he can shed a little bit more light on some of these issues. But you know where I get comfortable, just like everybody else who watches this show? I get comfortable where there's a solid, well-thought-out plan, whether it's in my personal life, my business life, any life. If there's a well-thought-out plan, you know what? I can get behind it. And if the plan doesn't go exactly right, you don't really get that upset. You just try to work with it, and you try to fix it. The way that these politicians are going about it, though, is just, again, insanity. The way that they just fight with each other and try to make political points off of our young children. That's not what we need to do. Roll the tape.
While the new school year will begin in August, it will not start with students at school facilities. The health and safety of all in the school community is not something we can compromise.
It's a tough decision. Health and education experts say kids are better off at school. At-home learning is not working as well for many students. Both classwork and social skills are suffering. And many kids are missing out on more than education, notes U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Chief Robert Redfield.
Whether it's the absence of mental health services, whether 7.1 million kids who get their mental health services in school, whether it's the nutritional services that some of the kids get, whether it's the fact that this is where most of our mandatory reporting for sexual abuse and child abuse is.
Have a good day. Children's risk of infection, severe illness, and death from COVID-19 are much lower than adults, but not zero. And teachers and staff are at risk. Teachers want to go back to school, but not if it's unsafe, says National Education Association President Lily Eskelsen Garcia.
And I want Donald Trump to sit in the back of my class of 39 and breathe their air. I want him to sit there for 7 hours, 5 days a week, and have those kids cough and sneeze on him.
All right, Lily, thanks for the paid political announcement. But here's the message. And I thought the CDC guy got it right. There are a lot of positives to sending the kids back. I'll give you a statistic. Nearly 30 million children rely on free or reduced price meals every day at school. Come on now, that's a big thing. It's a big deal. So that's got to be taken into consideration. But like everything, okay, we got to figure out how we open these schools up safely. Let's bring on our guests. Let's bring on our guest today, Dan Lopez from No Excuse University. Dan, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you today, Frank?
All right. Why don't you tell the viewing audience exactly what your university is and what your background and what you do. And then we'll get into some questioning that I think people are really going to want to know about.
Well, Frank, my background is in the field of public education. I was a middle school and high school principal for a number of years. I was in the classroom for 6 years, and I've served as a school board member in my community for a term. I've coached at both the high school and college level. I've been an adjunct professor. So my field or my service in education ranges across the spectrum. The No Excuses University is my current endeavor. I'm the CEO of No Excuses University, which is a network of schools across the country that works with teachers or educators and administrators on the creation of systems, how to better organize the work that you do around your school under the umbrella of college and career readiness. We have about 200 schools in 18 different states, and I've had the opportunity over the last 13 years to work with schools and communities around this country, seeing how to better support the children in those communities.
All right. Well, let's talk about the issue that's in the forefront of everyone's mind here in the United States and maybe around the world. Can the schools be open safely, and if so, how so?
Well, I think you hit on a really important point earlier, which is this: perception is reality, right? We have the responsibility as educators to support our families and our community in this field of education, and what their perception is the reality. And so we have a lot of different perceptions out there that we need to respond to. Parents are scared to send their kids to school. Some parents on the other side, they have multiple reasonings to send their kids to school. And so how we go about this process, it really doesn't matter what the exact nature is of how we open schools. It's how we support their families and the students in what makes them feel most comfortable. Yes, I agree completely. Schools need to be open. Kids need to be in school. We're missing out on the learning that needs to be taking place. We're coming off of at the end of the last school year, 9 weeks where not a lot of learning took place. I think that we all did our best to meet the needs of our kids academically in those 9 weeks, but we were so overwhelmed and scared with what was going on that we've already lost one step. So not only are we coming into this school year trying to figure out how to do the school year, we're trying to figure out how to make up for the last 9 weeks. We're trying to figure out how we're going to support all of the additional aspects of education beyond just the reading, writing, and math components of it, the social emotional aspects, the sports, the extracurriculars. All of those things are coming into play. I think that what we're starting to see is the school districts coming together, trying to figure out options that will work, providing parents with some form of choice that will work. I think the thing that we need to caution ourselves with is that under normal circumstances, under the best of circumstances, opening a school year is a monumental task. It is overwhelming for the administrators. It's overwhelming for teachers to start in a good scenario. I can't even begin to try and share how difficult this process is for everyone involved. You have teachers that have you know, I don't want to say limited technology experience, but they're not technology advocates, and they're having to learn how to teach online while they're trying to still continue to meet standards and help students with special needs and help students with IEPs and special learning disabilities. I mean, it's an overwhelming kind of endeavor. And like you said earlier, having a plan is the most important piece. We cannot fault our community leaders, our educational leaders. If we have a plan in place and we move forward and we're trying to do our best, we can only applaud that. I think what we need to be doing though is sharing those best practices. We need to, on a state to state and even national level, being able to share best practices that are working in communities. We need to get that out to each other and share that information with one another.
Yeah, see, Dan, I agree, but I don't see that happening in the environment that we're in because, you and I talked a little bit offline. I not to put words in your mouth, but I think you agree with my scenario that this has become politicized, and there's no other way to really look at it. You've got politics now that has even engulfed how we send our kids back to school. So I don't see that type of uniformity occurring anytime soon because the politics are just too thick. It's overtaken every aspect of our country. Let me ask you this question. Do you believe from all of your years that most of the schools when they reopen are going to be safe? And what would be the standard? See, this is the question that I get most from people. How many illnesses are too many? How do you underwrite that? How do you gauge that from the standpoint of seeing whether or not the program's working or not? How do you handicap that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Frank. I'm a doctor of education. I am not a medical doctor, and so following the CDC guidelines as a principal would be my step. But my experience in schools is, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, having kids before. When you have something go through a school, it goes through pretty quick. Use a strep outbreak, flu outbreak, the common cold for that matter. Kids pass germs pretty quick. So I think that we're going to have a situation where I personally, I'll speak for me personally. I'm sending my son to school. I'm going to try. I have a senior. He's 17. He wants to be on campus, and I respect that. He has some programs he wants to be involved with. We're going to send him to school. But as soon as we see that beginning of an outbreak, I am fully prepared to see his school shut down face-to-face learning. Now, like everyone, we're starting remotely, and we're going to ease into that, which I think is a good decision. But yeah, I think that whether or not we have, 6 illnesses, 60 illnesses, it doesn't matter. You're going to see schools shut down as soon as you see some form of a cluster of outbreak, if you will. I am certainly not the person to handicap what's good, what's acceptable, but I just think my experience shows as soon as you see a cluster of outbreaks in a school, you're going to see parents yanking their kids. It's not even going to be a matter of a school district shutting it down. The parents are going to be yanking them out anyway.
Yeah. I've covered on this show 2 aspects of the coronavirus that I think the way that we live is going to change. One is telemedicine. I believe that the incorporation now of telemedicine is going to become a very important factor as it relates to healthcare and how the average person deals with their own healthcare. I think telemedicine is going to become a big issue. The second big issue is telelearning, because that just makes complete sense to me. That, college kids take courses online. I mean, I know my kids have. They take courses online and they get degrees and they pass tests and they do all the stuff. The problem is every single educator at the elementary and middle school level, let's not even go to high school, elementary and middle school level, everybody tells me there's no uniformity to the telelearning. And I think it gets back to what you stated a few minutes ago that teachers are now trying to get themselves up to speed about how they handle this. And there's no uniformity to that. I think that is something that if I was a school superintendent, I would really get both arms and both legs around, because I think the tele-learning aspect is going to become something that's going to be with us for the rest of the time.
I completely agree. I think we starting to use this terminology of boutique learning. You know, you have these opportunities, options to do things in a smaller setting and smaller situations at home. I think that we're talking about, you know, hundreds of years of community learning is part of the issue. We have local control with school districts, whether you look at it from a state level where education is run by the state, you know, for the most part, and school districts are funded for the most part by your state. So each state is different to a certain degree. Then you go down to the community level where each district is run by its own governing board, and everyone's trying to both deal with things in their own fashion, meaning what are the values of their own communities, of their own school districts. We're also dealing with you know, an equity issue is part of my big concern as an educator. You know, you have the haves and have-nots like we always have had, but education is supposed to be the great equalizer. And in communities where there is not much to be had, it's incumbent on the state to provide those communities with some equalization, some equality to education. And as we move forward in this learning, in this e-learning environment, I'm really concerned about the equity. But you are certainly right. I think this is not only just here now; it is here to stay. And you're going to see. You may be seeing in some situations more competition, if you will, with who can provide the better service. And in some ways that might be good, right? I mean, from the standpoint of being able to provide e-learning in the best fashion, it doesn't matter where you're at. It can be done anywhere. And so we're going to be seeing who can do it best and seeing how those thrive. But from the current structure of our educational system, from a state-run situation, you're right. I don't know how we're going to get people to wrap their arms around it from a national level to be able to embrace best practices from one another. It's a huge endeavor.
Yeah. Well, I am concerned. I think you hit it. And I think the people that are out there, I'm concerned about the minority communities and the inner cities. If it does get to a tele-learning aspect of it, you know, I'm afraid that technology-wise, a lot of these people are going to be left behind, and we can't have that either. So this is really a big issue, and I think it's a big go-forward issue because I think the tele-learning is, again, it's going to happen. Technology is allowing for this, and again, you're seeing it in the colleges and even some high schools now. You know, you're seeing the tele-learning as long as it's organized, but I worry about the economics of it when it gets down to African American and Latino American children that may not have the resources that some of the kids in the suburbs have. So that's a concern.
I think too, with you're looking at it as we talk about it from a diversity standpoint. Absolutely, you're also looking at it from a socioeconomic standpoint. The poverty, the communities of poverty. Not only are we talking about access to technology, we're talking about access to accountability. You know, we have single family home or single parent homes where the parents working one, maybe two jobs. There's no accountability at home to help the kids get through this process. You know, normally we have kids coming in from homes where they're able to have some supervision for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, depending on what programs are at a school, and having access to that accountability and that support is really probably as equally as important as the technology issue, if not more. The support mechanisms that we have on campus How we transfer that to the at-home situation, I don't know how you do that
Right.
in those environments where you don't have the support at home like we're used to.
Well, and again, I think that's where the private sector, I don't leave it to the state or the federal government. That's where the private sector in each community, if they really want to try to make a difference, that's where the big corporations can really play a role in providing technology and computers and centers and other things that ultimately can really make a difference. Let me ask you the last question. People have talked a lot about teachers' unions. Do you see, if teachers start to come down with the coronavirus in larger numbers, if you will, do you see the unions then getting involved, and do you see all kinds of issues surrounding that, whether it's a strike, whether it's lawsuits? I mean, do you see in the teachers' unions? I'm worried about the teachers' unions. I know in Chicago, they've got a real issue up there with the teachers' union, and I think that you're going to see that around the country. And you say?
Yeah, I think it'll be a natural progression, and I think it's in that situation it would be inevitable. I mean, the unions are there to support the teachers, and in doing so, those individuals, that's their job, right? I mean, that's what they are. Are elected and or paid to do. So I think it's inevitable to do that. I think you're also going to see issues not just with illness. I think you're going to see issues with workloads. You know, as we talk about all these different options, and especially face-to-face learning, you have programs that are, well, maybe if we have half the kids come at this time and half the kids come at that time, and they have all these great ideas, but how do you fund that? You can't have a teacher working with all the same number of kids, a classroom of 35 kids, having half of them come or a third of them come, and then them working 10, 12, 14 hours a day, as many teachers are going to naturally be driven to do because they are givers. They're in this industry as
Right.
givers. But you're not going to have the opportunity. It's unreasonable to think that they can do that. And the unions are going to start stepping in, and the support groups are going to start stepping in to say, hey,
Right.
listen, we have, working to the contract, if you will, is going to be that first step in those issues.
Right. Well, Dan, how do people get a hold of you? How do they contact your organization if they want some information?
Yeah, my best opportunity for people to get a hold of me is just go to our website, www.noexcusesu, the letter U.com, noexcusesu.com. All my information is up there. I'm very accessible. Should anyone have any questions for me? And as always, as most educators, we're in this for the kids. I am not a political person. I think it's criminal when kids are politicized, just for the larger picture. We have a responsibility to the students of this country to provide them with an education that allows them to be our next generation. The next greatest generation is what we're going to need in this country, and we need to do whatever we can to make that happen.
Yeah, well, we need it fast. All right, Dan Lopez, thanks for your time, and it's great to be with you today. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Frank. Best of wishes.
All right. So, in closing, there you have it. You got just a lot of moving parts here with the schools. But I get back to the theme of what I think today's show real theme is. Forget about your base. Deal in the middle here. And these problems that we have, okay, are not going to be solved by either one side or the other. They're not going to be solved. And again, when it comes to the coronavirus and how we handle that pandemic, and then the opening of our economy, the opening of our schools, the opening of our cities, if you try to handle those two things, which we've been doing in this country, independently, you're coming up with the results that we're all seeing, which is nothing. You want to call, your representative that represents you in your district, tell him to get his ass or her ass in a room and sit down and don't leave until somebody figures out how there can be dialogue about fixing the problems that our country is faced with. We're not going to fix them by news conferences and political pundits on television gaslighting you, telling you how you think and what to think and brainwashing you. You're not going to get there. The only way you're going to get there is by having some old-fashioned common sense about how you fix any problem. You fix it right here. All right, it's been great to be with you today. Thanks for being with us with the show. We're excited that you are following our show. Again, you can follow us on the 2B Frank Show YouTube, the 2B Frank Show Twitter, 2B Frank Show LinkedIn, the 2B Frank Show Facebook, and the 2bfrankshow.com. I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli, signing off, and I want everyone to have a very healthy, a very happy weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for watching the show.